If you believe these stories must be remembered, subscribe to Echoes of Valor and help keep history alive.
By the late 1930s, Europe was collapsing into a darkness that seemed impossible to stop. Fascism spread across the continent like a wildfire, and nations found themselves pulled into a conflict they were unprepared for. But in Barcelona, far from the polished corridors of intelligence services, an unlikely figure was shaping a destiny that would one day alter the course of the world's largest war. Juan Pujol García was not a soldier, nor an officer, nor even a trained spy. He was the son of a modest Catalan family, a man who drifted through odd jobs and failed attempts at business. But behind his quiet demeanor lived an uncompromising hatred of oppression. He had survived the Spanish Civil War, seen brutality from both sides, and walked away with one conclusion: totalitarianism in any form must be destroyed.
When World War II erupted, Pujol felt an obligation, not to Spain, not to ideology, but to humanity. He offered his services to the British, insisting he could help them fight the rising threat of Nazi Germany. The British refused, several times. They dismissed him as a civilian dreamer with no experience, no connections, and no credibility. But Pujol was not a man who accepted rejection. If Britain wouldn't employ him, then he would make himself indispensable. He approached the Germans with a simple offer. He wanted to spy for them in Britain. The Abwehr, desperate to expand its network, accepted without hesitation. They gave him training, money, and instructions for infiltration. What they didn't know, what no one yet knew, was that they had just recruited a man who despised them.
Unable to enter Britain, Pujol relocated to neutral Portugal, and there, with no agents, no access, and no real intelligence, he began constructing one of the most convincing webs of lies in espionage history. He forged travel documents with nothing but ink and creativity. He wrote reports describing British ports he had never seen. He invented sources, dozens of them, each with their own backstories, schedules, and personalities. He mailed his reports from cities he had never visited, carefully manipulating postmarks. And the Germans believed every word.
His early reports were a strange mixture of guesswork, newspapers, and intuition. But his talent was undeniable. Pujol understood human psychology better than any trained operative. He told the Germans what they expected to hear, sprinkled with tiny, believable mistakes that only reinforced his authenticity. His handlers praised him as one of their most promising operatives. By 1941, British intelligence finally realized the truth. An unknown Spaniard in Lisbon had completely fooled the German spy network, and more importantly, he wanted to work for them.
It was the beginning of a transformation that would shake the foundations of wartime intelligence. An untrained, self-taught civilian had done what entire intelligence divisions failed to do: slip into the heart of the German espionage machine and become one of its most trusted voices. His codename would soon be known on both sides of the war: GARBO.
While London remained skeptical of Juan Pujol's true value, he was already constructing one of the most sophisticated intelligence illusions in the history of warfare. Working initially from Lisbon with nothing more than forged travel stamps outdated guidebooks and a mastery of imagination, Pujol began to assemble what would become the largest fictitious spy network ever presented to the German High Command. At first, the Abwehr believed he was a single agent operating inside Britain. But almost immediately, Pujol realized that one voice could not create the credibility needed to influence strategic thinking. So he invented a second agent, then a third. Within months, GARBO, his British codename, had fabricated an entire constellation of informants, each with unique personalities, backgrounds, and geographic locations. Some were factory workers, others were civil servants, soldiers on leave, or disillusioned Irish nationalists. Every personality was crafted with intricate detail, their families, routines, finances, even their personal frustrations with wartime rationing.
The brilliance of the system lay in its internal logic. Each agent seemed to feed another. Reports corroborated previous messages. Small observations, a ship leaving port, a regiment moving at night, or a blackout drill, were woven into larger operational narratives. The Germans believed they were receiving a mosaic of British preparation straight from the ground level. Pujol took ordinary newspaper clippings and transformed them into actionable intelligence. He tracked weather reports to explain why one fictional agent couldn't observe a convoy. He referenced football scores to timestamp messages accurately. This obsessive realism built the illusion of a network that was not just functioning, but thriving.
By late 1942, GARBO's intelligence was regarded as among the most reliable in their entire European portfolio. They rewarded him financially, unaware that the money was being used to pay non-existent informants whose loyalty and patriotism he invented on the spot. But GARBO's real power came from his ability to manage failure. When one of his imaginary agents died, he wrote heartfelt condolences. When another was arrested, he provided plausible details of British counterintelligence operations. The Germans mourned these people. They reorganized their planning around them. They read every line as truth. Once MI5 finally brought Pujol into the double-cross system, the fictional network exploded in scale. Now operating from London with access to genuine British military information, GARBO could blend authentic trivial details with monumental lies. This mixture, small truths as bait, massive falsehoods as payload, became the foundation of the largest deception operation of the war. By 1943, GARBO commanded 27 fictional agents across Britain. In German records, they were considered indispensable, the eyes and ears of the Reich inside the enemy's heart. What Berlin did not know was that not a single one of them existed.
By early 1943, the transformation was complete. What began as a single untested volunteer in Lisbon had become one of the most valued intelligence sources inside the Third Reich. Through his elaborate network of imaginary agents, Juan Pujol, known to the Abwehr as Agent Arabelle, was now feeding Berlin a steady stream of meticulously crafted reports. And in a war defined by uncertainty, Pujol offered something priceless, apparent clarity. The Germans grew increasingly convinced
that Arabelle possessed unparalleled access to British military, naval, and political circles. His messages arrived with an air of authenticity that professional spies often lacked. He included irrelevant details, personal anecdotes, complaints about rationing, delays caused by fog or broken bicycles. These small human touches made his intelligence feel real, almost intimate.
As the Luftwaffe lost dominance in the skies and the Wehrmacht began to struggle on both the Eastern Front and in North Africa, Berlin clung to Arabelle's intelligence as a stabilizing anchor. The Abwehr started routing his reports directly to senior command analysts. Some were forwarded verbally to Hitler's staff before they were even fully decoded. Hitler's faith in Arabelle was not built on a single revelation, but on a pattern of perceived reliability. When Pujol deliberately sent minor, low-risk truths, small convoy movements, weather delays, accidental explosions in British depots, German analysts verified them through other channels. Each confirmed detail further solidified his credibility. It was a psychological trap, and the Reich fell into it willingly.
By 1943, Arabelle received a level of trust reserved only for a handful of German operatives. Berlin praised him for his exceptional loyalty. They increased his salary. They encouraged him to expand his spy ring. The Abwehr even worried about his safety, urging him to adopt stricter security measures and requesting that some of his network switch to emergency codes. Meanwhile, in London, MI5 watched in astonishment as GARBO's influence grew. Every message Pujol sent to Berlin was intercepted, rewritten, approved, and sometimes strategically delayed by British intelligence. With MI5's support, GARBO expanded his imaginary army even further, inventing agents in Liverpool, Glasgow, Manchester, Portsmouth. Each had a biography, a job, a personality. Some were brilliant observers. Others, by design, were unreliable. The imperfections made the network believable.
The brilliance of GARBO's deception was his ability to anticipate German expectations. He fed the Reich what it wanted to believe, that Britain was stretched thin, plagued by disorder, and preparing for future offensives in predictable locations. His reports steered German fears, hopes, and assumptions with quiet precision. By the end of the year, Berlin considered Arabelle one of the most important assets in Britain, a spy whose insights could shape entire campaigns. They did not realize that every word he wrote was a weapon aimed at the heart of the Reich.
By late 1943, the Allies faced a singular strategic problem: how to invade Western Europe without being crushed on the beaches. The answer became one of the most audacious deceptions in military history: Operation Fortitude. And at the center of it stood a man the Germans trusted more than some of their own officers, Juan Pujol, codename GARBO. Fortitude South, the most crucial branch of the operation, required the creation of an entire army that did not exist, the first U.S. Army group, supposedly commanded by General George Patton. MI5 and SHAEF designed fake radio networks, inflatable tanks, dummy landing craft, and falsified troop movements. But all of these props were meaningless without a credible narrator, someone Berlin would believe without hesitation. That narrator was GARBO. Working from a small office in London, Pujol reported a steady stream of updates from his imaginary spy network. troop concentrations in Kent, the arrival of armored divisions, engineering battalions building temporary piers, and the supposed strategic impatience of Patton. His messages painted a picture of overwhelming strength gathering for a decisive blow, not in Normandy, but across the narrowest point of the Channel, Pas-de-Calais. Berlin's reaction was immediate and entirely predictable. Every report was read, analyzed, and forwarded up the chain. The Germans already feared Patton, viewing him as the Allies' most aggressive commander. If he was leading the invasion, logic dictated it would strike where geography favored swift reinforcement.
As spring turned into summer, GARBO intensified the deception. He sent updates describing final preparations, rehearsals, and coded warnings that the main invasion was still weeks away. The genius of Fortitude was not in convincing Germany that D-Day would occur at Calais, but in persuading them that Normandy was merely a diversion. June 6, 1944. As Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, Pujol transmitted his most critical message, a claim that the landings were only the first phase of a larger operation. The real blow, he insisted, was still coming at Calais. Berlin believed him.
For nearly 7 weeks, Hitler kept over 20 elite divisions, including panzer reserves, locked in the Calais region, waiting for a phantom army commanded by a general who had never left England. Those divisions might have crushed the Allies on the beaches. Instead, they sat idle, watching shadows and listening to the lies of a man they considered their most valuable spy. Pujol's reward was unprecedented. In late 1944, the Abwehr informed him that he had been awarded the Iron Cross, personally authorized by Hitler. No other double agent in history ever achieved such a paradox, honored by the very enemy he was helping to defeat. Fortitude worked, Normandy held, and GARBO had just executed the greatest lie ever told.
When the guns fell silent in Europe, the Allies had a problem: what to do with the most valuable double agent of the entire war. Juan Pujol García, GARBO, had deceived Hitler, saved the Normandy landings, and shaped the course of modern history. But victory brought a new and unintended danger. If even one surviving Nazi officer learned the truth, Pujol would be a marked man for the rest of his life. And so, in 1945, the man who had fooled an empire quietly vanished. MI5 constructed a new identity. With the help of British intelligence and a few trusted diplomats, Pujol staged his own death, officially recorded as malaria, contracted in Angola. Even close colleagues assumed he was gone. Obituaries were placed, documents forged. The world mourned a hero who was in truth still breathing.
Under his new identity, Pujol slipped to Venezuela, where he lived in near total obscurity. He ran a small bookstore, later a gift shop, raising a family who never fully understood the scale of the man's old life. GARBO, the phantom mastermind behind Operation Fortitude, now spent his days selling notebooks and postcards in Caracas. It was the perfect disguise, absolute normality. But his legacy lived on, even if he didn't. Strategists studying the Normandy campaign came to the same conclusion.
Without fortitude, the invasion might have collapsed in its first hours. With German panzer divisions uncommitted and held at Calais, Allied forces gained the precious time needed to link the beaches, build supply lines, and break out from the hedgerows. Military historians estimate that hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of lives were saved by delaying the German counterattack.
In the 1970s, author and former intelligence officer Nigel West began to uncover inconsistencies in wartime files. A dead spy kept appearing in documents after his supposed death. That discovery initiated a years-long search that finally led West to Venezuela and to a quiet, aging man who hesitated to admit his own past. When the truth finally emerged in the 1980s, Pujol was stunned that anyone remembered him at all. But Britain remembered. So did the United States. And so did Germany, now eager to understand the genius of the man who had deceived an entire wartime apparatus.